Hi friends, it's Amy. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you my TBR for Middle Grade March. Middle Grade March is a month-long readathon put on by Krista at Books and Jams, Katie at Life Between Words, and Amanda at The Curly Reader. And they have come up with 5 wonderful prompts and planned a beautiful group read that I'm really excited to read. But I also planned a couple of buddy reads because I just want to fill up my month as much as possible with middle grade. I have been a little bit slacking in middle grade lately, and I'm not 100% sure why. But as a teacher, I read a lot of middle grade. I have a lot of middle grade, and I want to share middle grade with my students. So I'm really excited to have this push to get me to read more middle grade this month. I signed up to do a buddy read with How Jessica Reads and Katie Proctor Writes and Reads on Instagram, and they're reading The Next Great Jane by K.L. Going. This is about a girl named Jane, and that's most of what I know about it. The back says a hurricane, a famous author, the most annoying boy ever, and a night of disaster. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm here for it. So my sister is the one that kind of pushed me towards this one, but Katie Proctor Writes and Reads and How Jessica Reads are 2 of my go-tos when I'm looking for recommendations on Instagram. So it felt like a pretty good bet that this was worth picking up. So that's The Next Great Jane by K.L. Going. And then as a patron of the Currently Reading podcast, they are reading Amari and the Night Brothers. And I have seen this all over BookTube. This is the most beautiful cover I have ever seen. It's just gorgeous. I'm so excited to dig into this one as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. So this is a buddy read with the Currently Reading podcast. And then finally, the group read for Middle Grade March, put on by Krista and Katie and Amanda, is The Brave by James Berg. And I am so excited to dig into this one. At the moment, I can't remember what they said. Colin can't help himself. He has a unique condition that leads him to count every letter spoken to him. See, now I'm remembering stuff. It's a quirk that makes him the prime target for bullies and a continual frustration to the adults around him, including his father. So this is going to be about his trials and tribulations. It's an Own Voices set in the Ojibwe tribe, but it just sounds like a beautiful book. And I picked one up right away because I feel like it's going to be something that I want in my classroom. So that's The Brave by James Berg. All right, so now we're on to the prompts. And I was so excited to find books for the prompts that as I was pulling books off of my shelves, I thought about many books I could think of that could go along with these prompts if I hadn't read them already. So what I decided to do is to share the book that I decided to read for each prompt, but then also to share a book that I would consider reading if I hadn't already read it. So these are going to be my TBR and my recommendations for each of the 5 prompts. So for the prompts. So the first prompt is a book with a silhouette on the cover. And I have chosen Song for a Whale by Lynne Kelly. And this was recommended by at least 2 of the hosts of the readathon. It is about a young girl who is deaf, and she kind of navigates her way through life. It is beautiful. It talks about also, it has a journey in it, and she's a tech genius. There's so much going on in this book. It just sounds wonderful. And I don't like, you can only hear so many people go crazy over a book without really feeling like you just need to pick it up and read it. So Song for a Whale is the one I decided to do for that because we have a silhouette up here on the cover. It could also count as a journey if I read the cover correctly. So it's kind of on backup if I get a little overwhelmed. If I hadn't already read the book, The Girl in the Well is Me by Karen Rivers, I would have chosen this book. So I want to recommend this book to you. This is about a girl named Cammie who is doing everything she can to become one of the popular girls. And they make her believe that they want her to be part of their group. And chaos ensues and she ends up in the bottom of a well. It is just a beautiful story. It's all told through her perspective, and you can actually read what's going on inside her head and what she's going through. And it almost feels like the author literally spent time in the bottom of a well. It's just beautiful. So good. I would recommend this wholeheartedly. That's The Girl in the Well is Me by Karen Rivers. The next prompt is a book that has a family element to it. And I have chosen to read the book, The Mother-Daughter Book Club by Heather Vogel Frederick. And I chose this book a lot because it's bookish. Also, one of my students recently read it and she raved about the series. She just thinks it's wonderful. This is the first book in the series, and they all center around different classical novels, and it's mothers and daughters reading books together, and who doesn't want to do that? So The Mother-Daughter Book Club by Heather Vogel Frederick is the book that I chose for that. If I hadn't already read it, I would absolutely be picking up the series of unfortunate events, The Bad Beginning. This book follows the Balderleer orphans, and they are orphans because their parents' house or their parents died in the house fire that not only robbed them of their parents, but also of their home. They are quite wealthy, except that Violet will not have any access to the money until she turns 18, unless a guardian asked like specifically for it, and it has to go through all these channels. So this first book, they find themselves living with Count Olaf, who is supposedly some kind of distant cousin to them. And what we find out is that Count Olaf does not necessarily have their best interest at heart. And it is funny and engrossing. And if you've seen the program on Netflix, it's really quite a good depiction of the story, but the book's better. So that is The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket. The next prompt is travel, journey, or adventure. And I have chosen to read Unbound by Anne E. Berg. This is a novel in verse, so it will be a pretty quick read. It's been on my TBR for quite some time, so I'm really excited to dig into it. It follows a young girl named Grace who is working in the big house at her southern plantation, and she does something that gets her in trouble. And as a result, her family must flee in the middle of the night in order to save their lives. It sounds wonderful. I cannot wait. I might not wait, honestly. If I hadn't already read it, Story Thieves by James Riley would absolutely be on my list. This is a wonderful start to a series about a girl named Bethany who is able to jump into any book that she wants. And so she reaches into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and she takes the chocolate out of the chocolate river and she eats it. But she gets caught doing that by Owen, who becomes her friend. But Owen thinks it's really cool to be able to jump into the stories as well. And they go on some adventures. It's a lot of fun. James Riley is a very funny and charismatic author. He develops his characters well. He makes fun of his own stories in the book. It's delightfully bookish as well. And it was just a lot of fun. And I highly recommend this series to anyone that asks for bookish adventures. The next prompt is a book that is a fairy tale retelling or has a fairy tale vibe. And I have chosen the book Half Upon a Time by James Riley. This is actually the book that James Riley makes fun of in the books, the story Thieves. This has been on my list to read since I read Story Thieves. One of the reasons I wanted to pick it up is because it is the buzzword for the Buzzwordathon put on by Books and Lala is time. So this book actually is perfect for that. So it kind of kills a couple of birds with one stone. This again is the beginning of a series, and this one focuses on Jack. So we have a little Jack and the Beanstalk action here. James Riley has a YouTube channel, and he read the first 10 chapters of this on his channel during the shutdown for the pandemic last March. So I am planning on putting those on and actually following along for the first couple chapters, and being able to hear his interpretation of what he wrote is really going to be exciting. So that's Half Upon a Time by James Riley. If I hadn't already read it, I would absolutely recommend Whatever After, the series by Sarah Mlynowski. Fairest of All is the first book in the series, and it centers around Abby and Jonah. And they have found a magic mirror in their basement that allows them to jump into fairy tales. And because Abby has loved fairy tales her whole life, she is able to understand what is supposed to happen in the fairy tales. However, she's not good at not interfering with what happens in the fairy tales, and they have to make them right. So this is Fairest of All. It is the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You can see the dwarfs on it. So the last prompt I don't have another recommendation to is, I don't have a recommendation for, is Decade You Were Born, written in the decade that you were born. And I was born in the 80s, and in the 80s, I was reading Sweet Valley Kids and Babysitter's Little Sister that were coming out. And then I started reading more of the Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley Twins. So a lot of books like that. So I kind of wanted to look for a book that that I haven't read, but also that would be really interesting. And I started by looking at the Newbery Medal winners, and I found The Whipping Boy by Sid Fleischman. Now, first of all, I have read books by Sid Fleischman before, and I very much enjoyed them. This is the award winner of 1987 or 6, I can't remember, but it follows Jemmy, who was a poor boy living on the street, but then he was chosen to be the whipping boy for the prince. So whenever the prince did something that would get him in trouble, he would take the whipping for the prince. That's what I know about the book. It's really short. I don't know anything else. I'm really excited to dig in. The cover is very intriguing to me. I love the look on this little guy's face. Their looks just cracks me up. So I'm very excited to dig into this. I really just, it'll be a very quick read. There's pictures, there's everything. This is probably gonna be the fastest read of all of my choices. So that is the book that I chose for the decade that I was born. So there you have it. That is my TBR. These are the books that I am reading for the 5 prompts. And these 3 are the books that I am buddy reading or the group read. So these are the books for that. And that is 8 books on my TBR. I've never had a TBR, much less than TBR, that has 8 books. But I can read middle grade pretty fast, so I feel like I should be okay with that. I also have so many other books that I want to read, so this is going to be interesting. So until next time, happy reading.